Okay, so scenarios and sensitivities. So I thought it was worth just covering off on that because people tend to use these terms synonymously, whereas there's actually, from a scope and model structure perspective, quite a difference between them in terms of what they're ultimately trying to do. And again, we get back to what is the actual process that these things are trying to support, what is the fundamental purpose of the model. So scenarios and sensitivities are incredibly valuable, but it's good to be, again, explicit and critical in your thinking as to which one might suit the type of analysis that you're looking to actually perform. So in terms of the actual fundamental difference, sensitivities are kind of localized data points. They're single point estimates or profiles that you're looking to apply to other data points. And from a logic perspective, they have a very immediate impact and they're usually quite localized and standalone. By comparison, scenarios are stored groups of assumptions. A scenario is usually a much more kind of robust and organized set of data points that together create a holistic view of the world. Again, with sensitivities, these tend to be more unique and standalone. Ultimately, most scenarios are typically just big groups of sensitivities or big groups of integrated assumptions. Now, as to when you should use a scenario versus a sensitivity, it's actually a pretty tough question, and a lot of the time it comes down to A, personal preference, and B, a lot of subtleties around what you're trying to achieve. Me personally, I quite like sensitivity assumptions because what I get to see is, for the movement in an assumption up or down by X%, what is the overarching impact on the model? And this is particularly valuable around things like, if you're running a deal model and you're trying to understand what is really kicking through and driving value. Sensitivity assumptions are a lot more beneficial because you get to see almost the movement of the mechanics of the model. By comparison, some people prefer scenarios because often with this, in order for a sensitivity to have a true impact, there's a whole host of other things that need to happen. So to the extent that I change, a price assumption up by 5%, I probably need to also go and change volume. I probably need to potentially look at my fixed cost structure. There might be a change to how I'm repaying debt, or, there's a whole host of attendant impacts that sensitivities on their own often miss. So scenarios are much more, I find them to be a lot more robust, and working up true scenarios is an incredibly powerful aspect to a model. Now, if you are running sensitivities and scenarios, the two key points also to note are that in terms of getting full benefit out of these things, two things typically have to take place within your model. In the first instance, your model has to be incredibly integrated. So you're going to have a density of logic that mean that when you pull one lever, the correct logic and flows take place throughout the rest of the model. And this isn't just in terms of the ops side of things. There is typically a whole bunch of complex treasury modeling that will reflect the fact that if I run a 20% downside case, what would I do? What would my treasurer for the company do in terms of repayments of debt, cessation of dividends, and things like that? So running either sensitivities or scenarios has an incredible impact on the need for your model to be comprehensively integrated. And the other structural piece that you'll need in order to get full benefit from your sensitivity or scenario work is some sort of locking mechanism or a copy-paste mechanism whereby you can actually store the scenarios or store the outputs of sensitivities to understand what the differential is from one to another. So from a build perspective, comparison infrastructure is pretty fundamental to running sensitivities and scenarios. The other piece you can also obviously use is a data table or something like that to kind of run concurrent cases. They tend to whir a little bit too much in the background, but ultimately, in order to get the benefit from sensitivities or scenarios, you really need to have the ability to actually compare them.